Thank you. Thank you all for coming. It's a much bigger crowd than I thought would make it here. So now that it's almost spring, it's 40 degrees out. I was just talking with Vic Hangus, and in 1970, I lived next door to Vic and Ruana Knife Works. And at that time, I was making ceramics and had originally come here attracted by the prospect of studying with Rudy Audio, studying ceramics. I thought I wanted to make sculpture. And so I was making ceramics, functional ceramics, and selling them at art fairs and at local galleries, and traded Vic, like 38 years ago, a set of mugs for a knife, very beautiful Rwanda knife that I still have and still treasure. And he and Judy, no, sorry, still have all the mugs, 8 of them. That's really amazing. It's almost everything I have is broken. I think I have about one thing left. Anyway, when I came here, one of the bonuses that I got by coming to the University of Montana was studying with Walter Hook, as well as Don Bunze and Maxine Blackmere and James Dew, and that school of art professors that were at the university at that time. And so I'm not going to start with my slideshow that far back. I've probably made 1,000 things, and it's kind of hard to sort through everything and show ceramics and sculpture and all the posters and cartoons and paintings. And so I'm going to start in the early 80s with some work that is more personal. Then I'm going to show some work that I've done traveling both in the world beyond Montana and the United States and in Montana, and how I learned a bit about the landscape and painted some of the landscape, and then how that affected some collaborative and commission work I did. So I picked out a few things from each of those genres, and that's what I'd like to show you. So if we could dim the lights and put up the first piece, and maybe get a little more focus on it. There we go. This is called Suburban Refuge, and it was one of my first self-published posters. I had been doing quite a few posters for various small businesses and nonprofit groups in western Montana, but was also working on the self-directed paintings that were non-collaborative and non-commissioned. And to make this connect to Walter Hook, I guess I should say that I always admired Walter Hook's gift of imagination and craft. And we can see that in his work here today. And I never got a chance to really... Walter would mostly talk about things. I rarely ever showed me how he did anything. And I didn't have that many classes from him, but we'd see each other socially. He'd stop by my studio and visit and see how I was doing, and basically he'd just say, the only way you're really going to make it as an artist, you just got to do it, and you got to do it, and you got to do it, and you have to make pictures. And really, what I could show you may or may not matter that much, but just make things. So I took his advice, and I've made a lot of pictures, and a number of those have been published as prints and posters, so they have been more widely seen than some other things. So I'll show a few of both of those. We could switch. The next slide. These pictures that I'm showing you now really had to do with, I think up until this time I had been making paintings that were abstract. And I had been making poster commissions that were figurative and realist. But very two-dimensional. And when I started making these, I decided I was going to try to start painting a three-dimensional illusion that had a concept behind it that was nature and the technological world of civilization that we live in colliding or interacting in somehow. And I'm still making pictures that have that basic theme in them, if we change. This one's called Kitchen Preserve, and I started introducing things like the kitchen I grew up in. This is very much, happened to have some friends in Missoula. When I visited them, I thought, oh my God, I grew up in this kitchen. That's it. It hadn't been remodeled yet. And now almost all kitchens have been remodeled. But so there was a little bit of retro furnishings involved in some of these. But if we just keep going, the next one. While I was making these, I was really just using birds as a metaphor for the wild and natural world. And as I did this, I learned more about birds and actually attracted the interest of naturalists and environmental and conservation groups who thought I was a bird artist. And I really wasn't, but I learned more about birds painting them. This one's called Dinner Goose. And in the background, you can see, I grew up in Great Falls, and my father worked at the Anaconda Company, which had arguably the tallest smokestack in Montana. Anacondans think they do. I think we maybe had, ours came off of a slightly higher mound. But it was a good 500 feet tall and dominated the landscape in Great Falls. So that's kind of the stack back there, and we can go on. Also, I started painting the animals that were in my life, like our cat Frida, and playing around with some things that were more maybe purely surrealistic. We can go on. This one, definitely more surrealistic, but using realist elements and learning how to put them in a three-dimensional space and make them appear to float was something that I was excited about and learning about, and was still also in my personal life collecting furnishings that you see in the work here. So various periods, I would have a room that was retro 50s, or it would be Hawaiian, or it would be, each room would be a little bit different. And as you can see with the next slide. This one's called Leave It to Beavers. And it has a lot of different elements in it that really tell the myriad of little stories, little poems kind of throughout. So if you just look at one corner of the picture, you'll see there's maybe something happening there that alludes to the whole picture, or in this case, it was really a painting about a loss of habitat. But we can move on. And also Molesworth furniture, which was great. We went to Hawaii, and I made this painting that was really a kind of an ode to our vacation in Hawaii. And it has a number of different elements in it that are Hawaiian fish and, Hawaiiana. But it was probably one of the first complete paintings that was inspired by travel. Because we started doing more and more travel, and I would make notations and paintings. My wife Mary Beth and I enjoyed painting in the field, plein air painting. And that was probably starting about 20 years ago. We started making those paintings. And so my more surrealistic or modernist paintings, we can switch to the next ones, started giving rise to more elements of the landscape in them. Just from going out and painting, I started to learn more about the landscape and drawing these pictorial elements together. This is called The Return of Lake Missoula. And this is just sort of meditating on the possibilities of the return of Lake Missoula and the fishing opportunities that might arise. But all of the fish are native fish that live here. And then here's the Wilma building, and the company that makes the fire hydrants in Missoula got wind of this, and they're in like Pennsylvania or something. And they wound up collecting this, and I got a really nice letter from the owner who said, "You're the first person that ever put our fire hydrants in a painting." He was so pleased. We can move on. This is called Heron Blues, and at this point the animals started moving out of the houses and into an exterior environment, and this sort of marks that change. And also they get a little darker. This is a night scene, and This is kind of a combination of different Montana streets. There's a little Butte, little Great Falls, and a little bit of Missoula in this street. And this is actually the studio I was in at that time, and I'm in there. I have the only light on because at that time I worked late quite often. And that would be on Front Street above the Top Hat Bar in the old KGBO radio station. We can go to the next one. This is called Return of the Wolves. And oftentimes when I would do a poster commission for a group, I made a poster advocating the return of the wolf to Yellowstone for Defenders of Wildlife in 1989 or 90. And that did happen some years later, and really became a historical achievement in wildlife management. But when I would finish working with the field biologists and was working on my own self-directed painting, things like this would come out. So this is the Return of the Wolves on a more personal level. And next. Again, the wolf seen a little bit differently. And this is a lithograph, which is a form of printmaking, done with, in this case, multiple plates, each one made by hand and printed in order on top of each succeeding color to form a final print. And it's kind of hard to see here, but the wolf is filled with notations and mysterious elements that have to do with mythology and social, historical things that connect the wolf to the society that animal now lives in, that we have created. And it's one of those bridge animals that's caught between human and human civilization and nature and ranching and all of that. And we all know about that. So next, I found myself making more paintings that had to do with that precarious point between animals like the magpie, who are survivors. Many people think that they should be our state bird. They stay here all winter. They survive. They're actually a beautiful bird, much maligned, but they seem to survive very well. Next. Another bird here, long-eared owl. Sure. And there's actually another bird, original painting that's behind the screen from that series that happens to be here that Todd Brandoff brought. So we can move on. The blue wolf I showed you earlier, this is more connected to that. The animal pieces started to become more mythologically infused, I guess, as I got more interested in animals and started reading about the cultural mythology of animals. In most cultures in the world, they tell stories about themselves, or there are metaphors about the culture, including ours and sports teams, everything, that have to do with animals. And it's just really interesting. And, it goes back many thousands of years. And so that started coming into the work. Next. In this one, the Great Bear and the landscape are united as one thing, and the bear has become larger in scale to the landscape. But there's a group called Vital Ground that their mission is to save habitat so an animal like the bear can continue to exist. Because as soon as the habitat isn't there, then the animal's gone. And especially major predators like the tiger in India and China, the grizzly bear, many animals are losing habitat. And in this case, in the ground below the bear are a number of things that allude to the social and the historic and contemporary implications of what it means to be a bear in this time that we live in now. And I can't quite see it. There are other things in the sky, too, that allude to that. Next. Another piece from that same series This is called Big Medicine, and pretty much kind of connecting with the same symbolism. Everything from arrowheads and sharps rifles to like a six-pack ring that's a little higher in the geologic order there. Next. This is part of a series of paintings from about 5 years ago that had to do with mythology and realism and naturalism within the context of the Rocky Mountain area. And this would be a whitebark pine, which is really, I call it the tree of life. And it's a tree that is in trouble right now. A lot of them are diseased and dying, but they're amazing trees, and they're one of the only trees that produce a pine nut that is actually a very nutritious food. The birds, bears, many animals eat it. In fact, like the Clark's nutcracker will take a seed and fly across to maybe an area on the other side of the valley, because these trees tend to grow in high and remote places, many of the surviving ones, like St. Mary's Peak in the Bitterroot or Glacier Park. And that's the only way the tree can really propagate itself, is by the bird planting that seed, and the bird's beak happens to be just the right length, so when it buries the seed will grow. Sometimes the bird probably go back and get the seed. Squirrels also gather them in middens, and the bears raid those, and it's a very nutrient-rich food. And the trees have a lot of character because they tend to grow on cliffs and in high places where they gain a lot of character from adverse and dramatic weather conditions. So they're always interesting trees, and that's what this one's about. So the time I wound up spending with the naturalists doing my posters wound up infusing itself into the work that I do. That's my self-directed work. So next. And these also had handmade frames on them, and were pretty bigger than the slides there, about 4 by 5 foot paintings. This one I call Ascension. And this is actually an ivory-billed woodpecker there, which they think they saw one in Tennessee, Kentucky, Arkansas. Next. Another one, call this one Northern Lights. And next, I think. This one is called Stealing Fire. And in many cultures, people tell stories about how they got fire. Prometheus stole fire from the gods in Greek mythology and was punished for it. Woodpeckers stole fire in a number of different Native American mythologies. Stole it from the trees and gave it to people, and we were on the moon before you knew it. It's amazing. This is woodpecker stealing fire. Next. I'm going to show you 3 slides here, and this is just to kind of show how I make a painting. This is called Moonlight Rainbows, and this is really, we're just looking at a small 9 by 10 inch study for what would become a 4 by 5 foot paintings, which is next. And also with a handmade frame that's a unique frame. And I like this idea enough where I decided to make a pretty large scale lithograph in about 26 color plates based on that. So we'd see that next. So that's sort of the development of an image over 3. And there were, smaller pencil studies and sketches trying to get at composition and that kind of thing. Next. This is a more recent painting. This is from last year, and I call this one Montana Power. These are buffalo nickels. Some have the Indian, some have the buffalo on them, and square butte in the background, and just really alluding to the history, energy, and the true power of the American West. And in, I think it was 1865, there were millions of buffalo. 20 years later, there were several hundred left. So the West changed really rapidly. And in Great Falls, where I grew up, when Lewis and Clark came through in 1803, 1802, the place they saw the most animals of any place they visited on their trip was right around Great Falls. There were herds of bison, elk, there were bears, antelope, deer. It was just like an African game park or something, only it was wild and natural. When I was growing up in Great Falls, you were lucky to see a gopher, you know, and if they put their heads up, they get shot. So, and I had no idea that many animals had lived there until I actually studied that later. It was something that just wasn't even talked about in school. What a ecologically rich area that was. So next. This is also a recent painting and exploring mythologically the context of the horse, with a Western element here, but also other elements going back to prehistoric images from the caves of Lascaux and on through history, Ming Dynasty, Egyptian. There's many images layered over the top of each other and very textural too. And the next one is similar, the bull. The bull is particularly just a historically really rich figure in cultures all over the world. So we'll have a little space here, and next I'm going to just show some paintings I started doing from the travel, and those tended to be landscape. This is in Sicily, and the temple and the tree are the same age, about 2,500 years old, which I found astounding. And the painting is only 5 by 7 inches, so it's tiny, tiny little painting. My travel paintings tend to be smaller. Next. This is from Ireland, and this is a menhir or a dolmen that's probably over 4,000 years old. That is in the western, near the coast, an area called the Burn. Amazing. Next. Also in Ireland, a curious sheep on a foggy day. Next. This is also in Ireland, and it was the tallest, thinnest stone standing in the British Isles, called the Doonfini stone on County Mayo on the coast. And rather than when Ireland was Christianized, the stone had been standing for 1,000 years, probably longer. And rather than knock it down, they just carved a little cross on it and let it be. Which is why one reason that Ireland is so rich in pre-Christian artifacts is that they just incorporated Christianity into their old religion, kind of just were able to meld. And that did not, many cultures, as a new religion or new ideas would come in, they would destroy the old stuff. And that's what makes Ireland very interesting artistically. Next. Meanwhile, in Montana, canoeing Holland Lake and late at night and just being inspired by the Northern Lights. Next. The Big Hole River, sunset. I also started floating rivers quite more often than I had before, about 1990, and that started getting into my work and fly fishing and other things. So this other kind of work started happening at the same time as the animal and myth work. Next. The little flowers on Mount Jumbo, the shooting stars that are one of the first flowers to come in the spring. About third, actually, but you know, we're not too far from there now. Next. Had a chance to float the white cliffs of the Missouri section of the Missouri River, and it you'll see that this later leads to being able to incorporate that in the commission that I did. So this would be the way it looks now, but it looked very much like that when Lewis and Clark came through in 1802, 1801. Next. I was always intrigued by these boulders that had fallen out of glaciers. They're called glacial erratics in Glacier Park and other areas in Montana. But in the cedar forest on the west side of Glacier, there are just some amazing areas where because it really hasn't been timbered, the trees just grow up and fall over when they die, and they just create all these interesting patterns. So, next. It's the Missouri River between Helena and Great Falls. And next. Rattlesnake Creek in winter. Next. Driving the highways in winter. Next. It's a little study I did on location in Rock Creek. And I make quite a few little paintings like this that lead to more carefully done studio pictures. And I also take a great number of photographs when I'm out sketching, and if the conditions are too adverse, then I just take photographs and work from those later and from ideas. But whenever possible, I like to sketch and paint too when time permits and weather permits. And so a small painting like this kind of is a touchstone to being in that place. And then when I'm in the studio under much better conditions, no rain, no bugs, music, all my materials there, I can make a picture that I think is like the next one, more like that, which reflects more being able to work at a larger scale. This would be a bigger painting, and considerably more detail, I guess, too. Both paintings have a certain character to them, so I just kind of thought it would be interesting to look at two of them, and this is very often the case for all the pictures I'm showing you. Very often at least one or two or three or more small color studies done, and pencil sketches too, before I reach a point where I start working on the larger painting. Next. Another studio picture that developed quite large, or at least that big. What happened is I found spending the time in nature and making these landscapes very satisfying and fun to do. So another element of picture making had been developing, and as well as the work I showed you earlier. So these two kinds of work sort of developed at the same time and kind of feed each other. And next. Another one. And oftentimes I find myself working with some similar metaphors, but in a much less dominant way. A painting like this where you kind of sit in a quiet place, and I think of it as a landscape painting, although I have friends that go, that's not a landscape painting. Landscape painting has landscape. But just a small space like this where the leaves falling off the water birch on top of the amazing colored stones that we have in western Montana. For instance, when we were in Hawaii, it was just astounding how beautiful Hawaii was. But I looked at their rocks, and their rocks were all black. Some of them were blackish red, others were, just black. And our rocks are like jewels. You look in Rattlesnake Creek, and they're blue and red and green and yellow, and it's really a blessing. And next. Okay, now the next little group of slides will be how both these bodies of work wind up being inspiration for collaborative or commissioned works that I make. When a group or organization approaches me about doing a print or a poster to help with fundraising and to help people understand the project that they're doing, I wind up having to really work with the client or with the folks that are representative of a group or an organization, and to come together. Sometimes they'll just say, well, you just do it. And I'll say, okay, I'll just do it. But we'd like to see the sketches before. Oh, we don't like those very much. So, anyway, so the collaborative work takes on. All films are done that way, and they're not done by one person. They're collaborative, and I don't really think of these things as being. That's why I'm not saying whether it's commercial art or illustration, because I put more into them than illustration, and I'm very the groups and organizations I work for, I have to really believe in. So I'm not like I know some designers and illustrators who will work for anybody that comes in the door and do what they do, and they're like a fast gun, and I'm not that. I'm a kind of a slow gun, and I don't do commissions for just anyone. But a few of the ones that we'll look at next were for individuals, and some are for groups. So, next. This was for a group called the Rock Creek Trust, which is trying to keep land open and accessible to the public, the length of Rock Creek. And this was done as a limited edition print and sold to raise money for education and the development of the work they were doing, which was really nice because it was collaborative. Ranches, state, federal, different groups, Trout Unlimited, ATV people, trying to come together and save something. Next. This one is actually a photograph of the print itself, so you can see the poster, I guess, poster print, the lettering there too. This one was called The Hush of the Land, and it's the Scapegoat Wilderness, and collaborative between the Helena Forest Foundation and the Montana Wilderness Association. We had an independent group and a federal state group coming together to work on various projects in the Scapegoat Wilderness. And the great bonus for me on this one was a 4 or 5 day horseback trip into the wilderness, and with some amazing people that were able to show us that area, and didn't pay very well. That was the pay. And but anyway, there's some animals that are introduced in there. But Cecil Garland, when he first advocated for the scapegoat being set aside as a wilderness, the term that he used was, one of the things that was intangible but very important was something he called the hush of the land. And trying to put tangible importance on wilderness is sometimes hard with nuts and bolts people, and congressmen who want, it's like there's oil or there's coal or there's power or there's this or that. And he was one of the first people to recognize the benefits in Montana of the value of wilderness just as it is. So that's what I tried to portray with this. Next. The painting I showed you earlier of my trip down the White Cliffs of the Missouri came in really handy later when I did this piece for the Lewis and Clark Foundation, and also the Lewis and Clark Center based out of Great Falls to commemorate the Lewis and Clark bicentennial. So this is the White Cliffs of the Missouri. We see Lewis and Clark and his men, and this was really hard to do because I'm not a historic artist. There are artists that really are into this. They live and breathe it, and they dress up in the clothes and do reenactments, and they're very knowledgeable about it. And I'm not. And so I had to do a ton of research just to make those little boats correct and the people in them dressed correctly. But when they came through that space, and they didn't run into any Native American people, actually, through there, which was unusual. They just were off hunting or something. But there were a lot of animals, and it was a very wild place. Although after they cross through this picture plane, it'll never be the same again. So, grizzly bear, bison, elk, wolves, birds, amazing. And it still looks just like that, except those are cows now. Next. This was a piece I did for Blackfoot Trout Unlimited and also the Blackfoot Challenge. And there's a number of groups coming together to really do some amazing things that are pretty much, I think, leading the way in groups and organizations coming together for common purpose. And so this was done as an art poster print, both to raise money and awareness. And this is, most of us have driven by this on the Highway 200 on the way to Lincoln, into the Ovando Valley. Next. A painting commissioned by the city of Polson to raise money for the new public docks they want to build. And I had done an art poster of Flathead Lake 20 years earlier that had was sold out, and people would ask for it, and the city thought, well, what if we just have them do a new one and try to raise some money with it? So I did this 2 years ago. The first one I did was a view looking toward the bird islands, and then this one is the view from the bird islands looking the opposite way. And this is kind of Polson behind the trees here. So, next. Kind of collaborative, a commission done for an individual and a friend. And I promised him I would do a kingfisher painting for him for years, and finally did it. And the way he got me to do it was didn't have quite enough money to take this trip we'd already bought tickets for. So he funded the trip, and when I got back I had to do it. But I was glad to do it, actually. And this is on the Blackfoot River. And went up the Blackfoot to kind of research it and find the right tree, and there was just this amazing sunset. It was just incredible. And the kingfisher came by, and it was just like that. Next. This is the painting or illustration for a poster I did for a group called the Yellowstone Association, which is the oldest advocacy group in Yellowstone Park that raises money for education and to hire naturalists, and they do just a lot of great things. And they've raised tens of millions of dollars over the years that have all gone into programs that the government doesn't quite have the money to fund. And I call this Bearing Witness. And at first I did 4 or 5 little studies for this, and I didn't do Old Faithful. I thought, I'm not doing Old Faithful. Everybody's done Old Faithful. And then they said, could you do Old Faithful? So, anyway, I did Old Faithful. Tried to bring something different to it. Next. So a group called Bear Trust International asked me to do a commission, and they work on habitat for bears all over the world, and they 8 bear species. And I was working on some of my mythological paintings, and I did several studies of kind of straight-ahead bears in nature. And then I did a study that was more global and had some mythology connected to it, and layering imagery, a little different way of approaching it. It's not the landscape with a vanishing point. And they really liked it, so I was able to do a piece that was more in context of some of the mythological paintings I was making, and the various bears. And a little story connected with this is kind of interesting. A group of women from Afghanistan, they were all teachers, were here about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and about 8 of them. And they were touring Missoula, and they came into the gallery on First Friday Gallery Night with their guide. And they kind of looked at my work and, because some of the work it's so connected to where we live or to idioms or to Leave It to Beavers, they wouldn't get that. They saw this and it was like, boom, they all went over and they were looking at it and then they wanted to know all about it. And they were able to look at this, and these were Muslim women from Afghanistan, first time in the West, and they could read it and ask many questions about it. And that was exciting because it was able to communicate to people from another culture, from another religion, that spoke a different language. So, next. This is a recent piece, landscape for Bitterroot Trout Unlimited. They have this print for sale, and they're raising money for work they're doing on stream restoration and especially tributaries that are clogged that were spawning, traditional spawning areas for trout and for other fish species. And the view here is, if you're north of Darby, the old Darby Road, it's on the east side of the Bitterroot Valley, and you can look down across the river and up at the Lost Horse Canyon. And I spent 4 days down there this past June just looking for a viewpoint, and found that, and it was just the right place. And actually, I didn't see the fishermen. There was nobody fishing, but there was a deer that swam all the way across. And next, we're almost done too. So, this is a piece I did that was commissioned by Montana PBS, Public Television, and it's a print that if you donate money to them, enough money, they'll send you one of these. And this is, I don't know if you can, this guy's a little out of focus down here, but it's a pretty big print. And this is the Front Range of the Rockies with a figure down here watching TV on this bluff with his dog, sitting in a comfortable, easy chair, kind of with the wagon wheels on it, and that's our dog, Dora. So, next. And then I thought it might be fitting to end with this one. This is the last slide, and since this is where we're at, and this was a piece I did fairly recently for the Clark Fork Coalition to celebrate the removal of the dam. And I come from a background, my father was a blue-collar fellow that worked for Anaconda Company. And I know there are many people here in Bonner that worked on the dam or have a history with that. So losing it can be both painful but there can be a new future too. So I wanted to approach this in a way that was not negative toward the dam. The dam is going for numerous reasons. And in my painting, it's disappearing. It's just evaporating kind of slowly. And hopefully it's celebrating its history as much as it is celebrating its demise. And original dam builder down here looks on. And little nature of goddess over here cheers the beaver on. And at one point, I had birds flying through the sky, and I had big trout leaping out here, and I took the fish out, and I took the birds out, and it's actually happening now. So when I was working on this, I was kind of imagining what it would look like, and the time of the year was autumn. So there you have it. So, thank you.